Whew, okay, hi, hello. Yes, that was a thing that happened. Welcome back, refiners, or should I say, welcome back, pawns of the evil Sith Lord Lumon. It's Miscellaneous Gab, and we are here to discuss Season 2, Episode 7, Chikai Bardo, and wow, oh wow. Much like the excerpt in Rickon's book, I did try to call 911 to ask the operator what I just witnessed, but alas, they could not give me any concrete advice or feedback. And since Apple TV has not responded to my request for free therapy after this video, I'm just going to have to discuss it with you. We talked about this in my live, but Season 1, Episode 7, Defiant Jazz is actually when we get the reveal that Gemma and Miss Casey are the same person. So I found it interesting that all of this backstory on Gemma, her journey, where she is, finally seeing what's on the testing floor, who is on the testing floor. It felt similar to the reveal that we got in Episode 7. We are just left with just as many questions that we're gonna have to muscle through, and still no Cobell Vig. We had a Cobell teaser in this, but no Cobell. I'm going to talk a little bit about the opening, and then I will discuss this in terms of 3 different chunks. Half this episode is a flashback episode beginning where Gemma and Mark meet at Gans College. Now, Gans College was also featured back in Season 1. Regabhi was hiding out in an abandoned part of the college when she killed Grainer. Is the college abandoned, like completely? Has higher education been completely abandoned in this town? We've already talked about how people being a little more stupid than you would expect them to be. Is the symbolism of where Mark and Gemma met at an academic institution, where Mark first kind of met the resistance in terms of Regabhi? Is academia and learning and free thought and history the symbol of the resistance against Lumon? Now, I heard at the end of the episode that their cinematographer was actually the one who directed this episode, and I just find the coloring, the colors, everything on the flashback to be so beautiful. We see brown, we see orange, we see green that we really haven't seen anywhere in Severance so far. We either have the sterile, harsh contrast of the severed floor versus the stark, bare bone, desolate winter that we see on the outside that's usually quite dark. Mark and Gemma are both at the same blood drive when they start some small talk, and we're hit with Mike's iconic, "Who are you?"
Sorry, who are you?
That felt really strange here. Like, it really felt like a nod to On Helly's First Day. I guess the magnetic pull of Gemma, her brightness, their physical attraction just had him cut straight to the point. Gemma says that she's reading The Death of Ivan Ilyich, edit for pronunciation, and Mark says, "Oh my God, spoiler alert." This is kind of similar to what the doctor says when he picks it up at the end of the episode and says, "Let me guess, he dies." Mark says that he's grading a paper called All Quiet on the Western Blunt, which clever. That's very clever. I would give the person an A too. It does look like they're happy and that the world was brighter with Gemma in it. We see a happier Mark than we've ever seen before. Now, I predicted wrongly that we would learn some bad truths about Mark, that we'd see that he's always been kind of a dick, maybe an alcoholic, but we really see that he's a good guy and he really tried to do his best as a husband to support his wife in the best way he could. We also see that Devon, Rick, Gemma, and Mark feel like more of a vibe, like they're happy together. Rickon seems a little more tolerable. In fact, Rickon actually did not exaggerate. It was Devon who said, yeah, it was like Mount Everest. He's like, yeah, it was just a couple of boulders. Normally, I would think that would be the other way around because Rickon always has something to prove. Now, when they're at the blood drive, we get a close-up shot of the Lumon logo at the blood drive. This has got to be important. Lumon is everywhere. They're on the record player. They're at the fertility clinic. That water droplet is so pervasive. They control everything. We then immediately go in and out of Gemma on the testing floor. She's wearing this light green jumpsuit. I got strong flashbacks of the movie Island with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson. Great movie, actually. Used to be my favorite. Okay, this is like a little bit of a spoiler. So just, if you don't want a spoiler for this movie, just like fast forward 20 seconds. They're basically kept on the inside in these jumpsuits, really healthy, exercising, because they are clones and maybe their outside personas might be on death's doorstep or need an organ plant, usually really rich people, and they're kind of there. Now, I know the show isn't about clones and Gemma isn't a clone, but still it made me think of that. Now I'm going to kind of separate into the different plot lines here. So talking about the shortest plot line, this is a third and more minor plot line, which is with present Mark, Devon, and Regabhi. Devon is really panicking here, and in her panic, she seems to be making some stupid decisions. I didn't agree with the decisions that she was making here, but I also had to put things in perspective that Devon seems to be the oldest sister who grew up with an alcoholic parent. Her behavior made a lot more sense in that context. Grasp for control to get in front of the situation, even being like, I'm gonna throw you off a bridge. I own his brain now. Speaks more to how she grew up and maybe what their childhood was like with a addict or unpredictable parent, that her behavior is kind of resurfacing here when things are scary and out of control. Devon has the bright idea to call Harmony Cobell, which is like, bitch, what? This lady stole your child? Regabhi nopes the hell out of there at the mention of Cobell. Like, literally is like, you said the word, you said Voldemort, I'm out. Regabhi says that Mark is, quote, journeying now, and Regabhi and Devon talk about the Demona birthing retreat, talking about the Innie cabin. So there are severed spaces outside of Lumon for other people, but Regabhi says this is completely different. You can't just bring Mark there as a severed worker and hope that his Innie turns on. Regabhi seems very spooked about the idea of Harmony Cobell. She says that she is Lumon through and through. She is raised by them. She's a soldier. This plotline culminates with Devon saying to Mark, "Where did you go?" which is actually the first line that the nurse says to Gemma.
Gemma, where did you go?
Sort of get this feeling that their souls, the transitioning, the bardo, this space between life and death, that they were seeing each other in this space. And I think that speaks to their connection and their both vital importance to Cold Harbor and Lumon potentially because of this connection that transcends even life and death, innies and outies, everything. Now let's talk about Gemma on the outside. It seems like they are very happy until their fertility struggles. I can't pretend like I know what this feels like because I don't, but I think that miscarriage and fertility struggles are actually something a lot more people go through than we might even realize. So my heart went out to her in these moments, and it seemed like even though she had a great and supportive husband, that she even started to grow numb and distant from him. She and Mark visit a fertility clinic. We see the Lumon logo on the clipboard, and we also see fucking Dr. Maurer walking by, side-eyeing Gemma, almost like he already has his eye on her. Just a quick note of the doctor's office and time period. I know it's something that we discuss a lot. They have all these files on the wall at the doctor's office, which tells me that they haven't really switched over to digital yet, know what the cars look like. And we see Mark typing on a typewriter. Even though this must take place in the 2020 era, I sort of wonder if Lumon is tech hoarding, if maybe society was like reset at some point or something happened and they had to rebuild and this area became tainted, and that's why Keir came to this area of the country and sort of took over. Mark tries to console Gemma by telling her that this is the next step for a lot of people and that they can take a break if they need to at some point. And then when we see them together actually giving her the fertility treatment, she says, "I'll write you a thank you note." He says, "You hate writing thank you notes. This is important for later." Mark says that there's a kid at the end of this. You just gotta reach through and grab her. The her was very interesting, saying her, especially later when Dr. Maurer says that Mark already has a daughter. She starts to shut Mark out, growing numb, growing more inside of herself. We then see the scene where she's playing with the Chikai Bardo cards and how she says it's not a man fighting another man, it's a man fighting himself, it's ego death. There's a piece of paper next to her. It seems to be what she's filling out, and I couldn't get a great look at it, but it looks like it's some sort of entry to win a cash prize. Sort of some Rorschach test of draw a rabbit, draw all of this, draw all of that. I wonder if that's some pre-vetting, pre-screening, and they sort of do it along the lines of you could be enter to win $1,000 cash prize or something. She said she got on the clinic's mailing list by mistake, but we know there's no mistakes here. We know Dr. Maurer already had his eyes on Gemma, didn't he, the little... Gemma and Mark argue, and she says that she feels like shit, beat to shit. And then we end our sort of outside plot line with Mark, of course, getting the bad news. This scene was so heartbreaking, so heart-wrenching. makes you want to just grab all your loved ones and hold them close. So do that today if you haven't already done that. Now let's talk about Gemma on the inside, bopping around to all these rooms, the same names as the files that MDR has been refining. Gemma is constantly undergoing bio tests, blood draws, some sort of rock holding situation, lie detector, maybe it's a temper testing, maybe it's a temper balancing situation. There's also the goat eye chart, which, okay. Are they trying to put people's brains in goats' bodies? Every day she seems like she's supposed to eat, read, work out, get her vitals measured, and journey into a certain number of rooms. She goes and opens her outfit for the day and says, shit.
Shit.
Her outfits are very interesting. They do not seem of the present. They seem either 60s, 70s, 80s, even 50s housewife vibes in the Christmas scene. And she says shit. We don't know if that's because she just doesn't like the outfit, that she doesn't like the idea of putting the wig on and the dress. Or we could wonder, is this always the outfit that she wears into Wellington? In some subconscious part of her, she's like, ooh, every time I go into Wellington, my mouth hurts. Each room requires a blood draw from the nurse. Lots of blood, lots of DNA. We finally get an answer on who was whistling the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It was not Fields. I repeat, it was not Fields. Dentist's room, Gemma seems very hesitant. Mr. Maurer talks to her while the overseer Mark guy monitors her. We see the severance chip in her brain as she says that her mouth hurts, and the 5 buckets with different tempers under each bucket. Mr. Maurer says, which room caused your mouth to hurt? She obviously doesn't know why she's going into these rooms. She remembers nothing, and the goal is to test if she remembers nothing. She's only feeling physical symptoms, which maybe means their plan is working. She feels the pain in her mouth, the soreness in her hand. Maybe that is the point of what they're trying to do, that you can have all the hard parts of life sequestered off and carry no baggage from them. It is interesting that we saw her wear 4 different outfits. We saw her go into 4 different rooms. We have the dentist, we have the plane, she's wearing some sort of workout outfit as she goes into a room, and also the Christmas card. These are kind of like 4 tempers, right? The main feeling. You have woe in the dentist office, you have dread on the plane. She felt like very malice in the Christmas card, hatred, anger, and then maybe frolic for the exercise. What do you guys think about that? She asks, what happens once I've been in all the rooms?
You will see the world again, and the world will see you.
She says, so I'll see Mark, and we get her first genuine smile.
Mark will benefit from the world you're siring. Kier will take away all his pain, just as Kier has taken away yours.
This makes me wonder, is this something where she was indoctrinated in her most vulnerable space? What sort of lie was she told to convince her to potentially fake her own death, to be away from her husband for all this time, possibly to never see him again? It must have either been a pretty strong promise of something or a pretty significant brainwashing. Now, how did they get her on an airplane? Clearly, they're not hiding a jet in the room. Is this a simulation? Some people think the Ortbo was. I don't think we're talking about the airplane enough. Like, how was she on an airplane? Now let's talk about the thank you note. So we see this close-up of this panel that shows different dials. Now this is all in German. I think this is the same panel that's on the record player. I looked up all these words in German and they just kind of mean different things, frequency, volume, etc. But also very interesting that this is in German. In the thank you note room, Mr. Maurer gets to be her husband, which I'll talk about his creepy as fuck intentions at the end. We also see her writing with her left hand. Earlier we saw her writing with her right. Maybe she completely fatigued out her right hand and now her left is taking over. Either way, poor girl, her hand hurts. Howdy Gemma hates thank you notes. I don't know anyone who wants to sit there for hours and hours and write thank you notes. It almost seems like Mr. Maurer gets some sick, twisted pleasure. Like, the funny thing about Christmas is it comes around every year. After this scene, she confronts Dr. Maurer and says, I want to go home. Dr. Maurer says, your husband remarried last year and he has a daughter now. He tells her she's been here a long time. I don't think she has any genuine understanding of exactly how much time has passed. He then says, maybe you've moved on too in one of the rooms. Maybe I've seen it. He picks up her book, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and says, let me guess, he dies at the end. She hits him on the head with a chair and breaks out. This is definitely like at least the second time that she's physically assaulted him. In the control room, Drummond says she tried to break your finger. She runs down to the elevator, goes down, and then goes towards the severed floor and is very successfully intercepted by Mr. Milchick while she becomes Miss Casey. If this is so sad, and this feels so sinister. This is nightmare fuel. Milchick just hot off the press, right off his motorcycle. He had to just kind of whip it off there. She says, where's, and then he cuts her off. And was she going to say Mark? Now let's get to what we learned from Mr. Drummond in what I like to call the spy room. The people who look like their MDR counterparts are actually watching through the computers. Quote, Lumon is listening. They see Mark and Miss Casey together on screen, but if you rewatch season 1, episode 5, Miss Cobell says that Miss Casey shadowing Helly R was something that she cooked up and even asked Milchick, hey, keep this between us. But clearly Mr. Drummond and everyone can see this happening. Clearly it's not that big of a secret. Are these counterparts of the people observing the MDR people, are these also severed employees? Drummond asked the question, are the severance barriers holding? I'm guessing he means between rooms. And I think this could really speak to what they're testing. Severed barriers, severed spaces. You don't need a whole severed floor, an elevator. It could be as simple as doctor's offices could advertise that you can be severed when you come in. Gyms, airplanes. They're trying to build severed spaces everywhere as a grand plot to get chips in everybody's brains. The thing is people will usually sell their freedom for two things, safety and convenience. So if people are perceived to be unsafe or there's a threat, maybe they will, I don't know, let the government spy on them if they're scared of terrorists. Or maybe if there's convenience involved or entertainment, maybe people will give up all their data, not really care who's tracking them. If you could potentially sever yourself to do anything inconvenient in your life, going to the dentist, going on an airplane, these things that maybe provide these extreme temper feelings. The doctor is wearing a blue workout suit and a wig that matches the outfit that Gemma wears as she walks into another room. He says she's easy to like. She's fond of me too, of course. This is where Drummond says, didn't she try to break your fingers? Mr. Maurer is at a Cobelvig level of obsession here. Milchick told Mark that Cobell wanted a throuple between Innie and Outie Mark. What do you call it when someone wants a relationship amongst all of your Innies? Quadruple? An octuple? It also shows us that she's a different person. Can one severance chip bring you these different personalities? Remember, this is the testing floor, so this has to be more advanced than just the people who are maybe refined on the severed floor, or maybe just the women who are going to the birthing center. Drummond talks about how they're almost done with Cold Harbor and that Mark's nosebleed set them back. Interesting that a nosebleed set you back and not the whole, I don't know, fornication in the spare room. I'm sorry, Drummond, but if Cold Harbor is so important, why in God's green earth are you having Milchick put thousands of paper clips on pieces of paper rather than just doing his damn job and bribing the Innies with melon parties to get the damn files refined? Come on. Drummond says when this is done, you're going to have to say goodbye to her, almost like he can pick up on that obsession. He then says, why are you wearing that stupid sweater? So that tells me that Mr. Maurer is going above and beyond maybe his call of duty, just like Cobelvig, and really developing an obsession with Gemma. Maybe he's just supposed to be observing her in these rooms, and he's now built himself into the worlds that she's in. One question I had during this was, could this be like a Westworld style male fantasy? I'm not a man, but I'm like, is it a fantasy to be someone's doctor or dentist? Maybe a fantasy to have someone be the damsel in distress on the airplane, to be able to play this like 50s era husband where you have complete control and you boss your wife around. I don't know. I don't think that's like like the purpose of this. I don't think they're trying to sell this as like men can come into these rooms and have these fantasies with almost these like virginal innies, but that is something I was thinking about. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. All right, so let's talk about the conclusions and the consequences from this. Why did Gemma get wrapped up in Lumon in the first place, and was there any actual car wreck? I believe that she came here on her own volition. I don't know if they said that they would figure out a way to make her disappear, that they would find a way to tell Mark. They probably lied to her. I don't think someone who loves your spouse will like willingly do that to somebody. I mean, that is pretty cruel, unless they really indoctrinated her into the cult of Kier and she became totally brainwashed, and they either promised her something psychological, like Kier will set you free, Kier will ease your pain and he will help your husband, or they maybe promised her something physical, which is like, hey, you have to do all these science experiments, go into all these rooms, we got to balance your tempers. But on the end of that, we'll let you go. You can reunite with your husband and you can have a baby. So they definitely preyed on her vulnerability. They definitely preyed on her desperation. I'm just not quite sure in which way. What if the promise was Chikai Bardo? What if it was ego death? What if it was you get to a point where the pain can't touch you anymore? Is that what is waiting for her in Cold Harbor? Is it Chikai Bardo? Or is it the ability to actually give birth and have a baby? Part of me wonders if that blood test got Lumon's attention on Gemma, maybe even Mark. Maybe there are these like Kier bastards running around and they're trying to consolidate the bloodline. We see Gemma wearing wigs when she goes into different rooms. We see Mr. Mauer wearing wigs when he goes into different rooms. And the whole thing she knows in the Chikai Bardo card is like, oh, it's the same hair. They're fighting themselves. I found that theme of hair and disguising your appearance and changing your hair almost means like those are still different versions of her. And maybe the goal of Cold Harbor is to like coalesce into one purely refined, perfectly balanced thing. Maybe Cold Harbor is a place where you're no longer you. I could see that as the culmination, but I also think that this is going to change the world in what they offer to the public. Maybe it is they're trying to offer these conveniences so that everybody gets severed, or maybe they're just picking these things that are extremely unpleasant, things that people hate, that get your tempers kind of up in a tizzy, to see if there's any leftover impact beyond just like a physical soreness. Now that we finally know where the exports hall leads, my question is, how does Irving know so much about this? It's not necessarily where people go to get reset, it's where all the rooms live. Unless he really is just working with the opposition, he's working with Regabhi, and they know that there's something here, but they don't know what, and they know they need to get to it. Now, the only thing that I can't tie together is how the Lexington letter fits into this. We are pretty sure that the truck explosion was caused by the refining of the Lexington file. That seems kind of in direct opposition to what's going on here in terms of they're refining the files to like get the rooms ready, maybe to perfect that part of the chip that should be in control. That is my episode analysis review. I'll probably watch it a couple more times and think of some more things. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Before I hop off, I do want to thank my Waffle Party VIPs on Patreon. I appreciate your support so much. Big shout out to Mr. Vaca, Davis Crushing, Jim Rodney, Chris Bezeski, Bo Dierker, Matt Winbury, Dolores Abernathy, and Daniel Ariano. And thank you to everybody else who supports me on Patreon. And guys, every like, comment, share, every support that you give me, I appreciate so much. I'll see you next week on the live. I also might be cooking up a fun collab with one of our other favorite YouTube Severance creators. We shall see. See you soon. Remember to stay safe out there. Truly stay safe. Hug your loved ones and don't get severed no matter what they promise you. Don't listen to them. Bye, guys.